Is it okay if I run to the bathroom real quick? Thank you.
So, is everyone here?
Brenna's in the bathroom. She'll be right back.
Cool.
I'm back.
Is everybody here? Oh, okay, awesome. Cool. Cool. All right. Then before we start, we just want to give a quick content warning for sexual violence. There's no explicit depictions, but we do talk about sexual violence during the PMC, which I feel like it's central to the topic, but there won't be any explicit depictions of sexual assault. So the resolution is the United States federal government should decrease its military guarantees to Japan. The definitions here are contextual, but please feel free to ask us during flex. Next is the inherency. Subpoint 1 is going to be, according to the CRS, or Congressional Research Service, in 2019, the U.S.'s primary guarantees to Japan is the guarantee of security in exchange for basing rights in Japan. There are currently 54,000 troops. The plan is that the USFG should withdraw all troops from Japan. So the solvency, that means all 54,000 troops will be removed effective immediately. So advantage 1 is going to be Senkaku, or China and Japan. The uniqueness, 1, Japan is ramping up its military conflict with US in the SQUO. The ASA point is that US troops are leading military exercises with Japan in Senkaku. The BISA point is that troops are responsible for training and readiness. US troops are responsible for training and readiness of Japan. The second uniqueness is China is responding as such to these increased military training. The ASA point is that China spent 54 hours in the area with military ships, the longest time ever, last weekend, monitoring the area. The third uniqueness is that China is seriously interested in Senkaku, but Japan has interest there as well. The ASA point is that China has years planning strategy in Senkaku. The BISA point is the first island chain is an artificial boundary line where Chinese ships need to penetrate if they want to go into the Pacific. And according to, if Japan can maintain control on this island chain, what they can do is they can limit Chinese assertive influence. So the fourth uniqueness is Japan's New Democrats are pushing the government to the right, indicating defensive or offensive strategies against China are coming. So we're gearing up. Some of that is we're gearing up for conflict against China. So the solvency is that one, the plan reduces military guarantees to Japan. The basic point is that reducing troops is key to reducing support for Japan's military overall. Second point here is going to be reducing troops reduces readiness exercises, which prevents Japan from retaliating to Chinese aggression. Third argument is going to be Chinese intervention is inevitable. The basic point is that military exercises prove that that China has had years-long interest in order to get trade in the Pacific. If we prevent that trade from happening, they will retaliate. And then the basic point is that exports are key to the Chinese economy, bringing in $2.5 trillion every year. China will retaliate if its main export is prevented. So the impact here is there's going to be one impact, which is going to be war. The ASA point here is just going to lead to flashpoint conflicts, proxy wars, and great power wars. So proxy wars specifically are dangerous because proxy wars have higher rates of mortality than traditional warfare. And then the basic point is that a great power war could inevitably lead to nuclear war, which would lead to total extinction, which would mean everyone on the planet would die. And then advantage two, can you guys hear me? Okay. Advantage two is going to be assault. So the uniqueness point one is that U.S. troops guaranteed to Japan has caused rampant violence against Japanese populations. The ASA point is that according to the Asia Pacific Journal, there's been over 389 court-martial trials for service members that have committed sexual assault in Japan. And this is just for people who are reported and put on trial. The BISA point is that the annual report on sexual assault in the military estimates that in Okinawa, U.S. Marines have committed well over 2,000 assaults and believe as many as 68% of assaults go unreported. The CISA point is that the Sydney Morning Herald notes that in 2019, that the presence of U.S. troops in Japan is the primary driving factor of illegal sex trade in Japan, as well as Southeast Asia. GIs are viewed as the primary customer for the young girls who are sold into sex slavery. The DISA point is that previous attempts at resolving these issues have failed. In 2016, CNN reported that troops were temporarily confined to a base ground, but there were over 20 reports of assault during that time. So the solvency, one, the plan removes troops and that resolves for the violence. The fact that troops are no longer in Japan is literally the only thing that can solve. We've attempted to just confine soldiers. We've attempted to place regulations on them. We've court-martialed literally 389 soldiers, but this continues to happen and is the driving force behind like young girls getting sold into sex slavery. The only way to solve for this is to just completely remove the soldiers. If we get rid of the market, the sex trade will stop functioning. That brings us to our impact, which is prevention of sexual violence. The ASA point is that sexual violence ought to be the most important impact in the round. It is the product of U.S. imperialism and more broadly results in the thousands of individuals being dehumanized and hundreds of them literally being killed and losing their lives as a result of this sex trade. Vote aye. We're going to start flex if that's okay.
Unmuted? Yep. All right. It's going to be 4 off. Oops.
3-1 standard on T.
Yeah, cool. It's going to be 4 off and then add 1, add 2.
Are any of the off going to be long?
No, there's no Ks or anything. Anybody not ready? Sounds good. Interpretation guarantee is a formal promise or assurance, typically in writing, that certain conditions will be fulfilled, especially that a product will be repaired or replaced, if not a specific quality and durability. Guarantee is a formal promise or assurance, typically in writing, that certain conditions will be fulfilled, especially that a product will be repaired or replaced, if not a specific quality in writing. There are 2 topical affirmatives. Amending or getting rid of the Treaty of Mutual Cooperation and Security between the United States and Japan, or amending or getting rid of the security treaty between the United States and Japan. The violation is that's not what the AF is. It's removing all troops, which is not a military guarantee that exists in the status quo. The only standard is going to be predictability, particularly your AF is not predictable in a world where there's only 2 topical affirmatives. This moves the entirety of the prep for the negative and eternally skews any form of fairness, because we can't prep solid warrants and answers to your affirmative, but also skews out education, because we lose a particular clash on the warrants, which is always going to be terminally bad, because clash is the only unique form of education we get to debate. This is a voter for fairness in education. This is a priori because you need to know the rules of the game before you play it, and competing interpretations because reasonability is just based on definitions of what's reasonable. The disad. Uniqueness 1 is that natural disasters are high now. The A argues that in 2015, 24,000 fatalities and $71 billion worth of damage were calculated from natural disasters. The B argues that of 375 disasters, 168 were in Asia, which means Japan is uniquely vulnerable to things like tropical storms and hurricanes and earthquakes. The second uniqueness is that natural disasters are getting worse. The A argues that warmer climate allows more intense storms to develop and more hurricanes. The B argues that more heat and water provides more fuel for tropical storms. The C argues that sea level rise magnifies the impact of natural disasters and makes coastal flooding much worse. The third uniqueness point is that natural disaster cooperation is at an all-time high. The A argues that bilateral disaster relief is being developed in the status quo. The B argument is that Operation Tomodachi was the U.S. military disaster relief program in 2011 that involved 24,000 service members, 189 aircraft, and 24 ships. The C argues that standard operating procedures have been established through the Sendai framework. The links. The first link is that the plan undermines the bilateral cooperation. The airs that the plan signals that the U.S. is not willing to cooperate with Japan, which sends a signal to the Japanese government that they don't have any more bilateral cooperation. The B argues that natural disaster relief is based on armed forces, particularly literally having boots on the ground. Only strong bilateral, like having troops on the ground, is able to solve. The internal link is that this guts Japanese disaster preparedness by removing the U.S. infrastructure. The A argues that U.S. base positioning allows for efficient response. The B argues that U.S.-based fleet logistics and support were crucial in 2011. The C argues that the USS Ronald Reagan was a key refueling station in 2011. The D argues that the 7th Fleet flew 160 search and rescues during the Fukushima disaster. The impact is that natural disasters annihilate human rights. The A argues disproportionately affect rural and disadvantaged communities. The B argues that the poor areas lack the tech to detect and respond to natural disasters, meaning that they're hit the hardest. The C argues that natural disasters make vulnerable populations more vulnerable by reducing their access to resources, but also that the most marginalized parts of society, when they go to receive these resources, are always excluded. This always magnifies any form of structural violence, but also a lot of people die. Next is uniqueness 1 is that Southeast Asia, U.S. hegemony is on the brink. The A argues that China unveiled a PLXX missile, which is capable of air-to-air combat. The B argues that a U-Ting class ship was spotted with a hypersonic railgun that's able to take out other U.S. ships. The C argues that the 7th Fleet will be 1/7 of China's naval capacity by 2025 if this current trend keeps up. The second uniqueness point is that Japan is the biggest ally to U.S. in the region. The A argues that Trump's rhetoric has destroyed South Korean relations, particularly him meeting with Kim Jong-un and not taking air. and taking a particular stance on the issue. The B argues that Japan is the staging ground for the Seventh Fleet. The third argues that Japan relations are fragile. The A argues that Japan is shifting away from the U.S. umbrella and experimenting with high-speed glide missiles. The link is that this destroys Japan and U.S. ties as it removes every single military positioning in Japan, which means that there's not able to have strong military ally in the region. The internal link is that is Chinese aggression. The A argues that when the U.S. is perceived as weak, China will move into the South China Sea, particularly because the U.S. naval presence is the only thing stopping further aggression in the South China Sea. The B argues that island building is literally happening now within the status quo. The impact of South China Sea war. China sees U.S. hedge collapse as an opportunity to expand. The A argues that war is inevitable. This is because of Trump's nuclear posture review, which says that he will that his nuclear posture is primarily based on the use of low yield tactical nuclear weapons, which indicates that he's willing to strike China. China has also ignored the ICJ ruling in the South China Sea regarding their island building, which indicates China is not willing to back down either. This necessarily goes nuclear because of miscalculation, as well as Trump first strike, which always expands into thermonuclear war, which kills everybody as irradiated winds travel around the planet and cut off all life. The counterplan: the USFG should dishonorably discharge and freeze benefits to any U.S. troops court-martialed for assault. The USFG should dishonorably discharge and freeze benefits to any U.S. troops court-martialed for assault. The solvency is this solves the second advantage better. Benefits are the primary reason that people join and stay in the military. It's 750% of personnel. 75% of the personnel budget, because the military knows it's how they retain their force. The second is this solves advantage 2 much better, because I'll get to this on case, but advantage 2 is just going to re-put those troops in some other location, but this solves the issue on a broader scale. We would also indicate that this competes by not removing a bunch of troops, which removes the U.S. and Japan's relationship militarily, which is key for the two disads to avoid those. Onto the plan proper.
Competition.
It competes functionally through the disads. On the Senkaku advantage, the first argument I want is that the status quo solves. Chinese aggression is necessarily checked by U.S. troops. There's no inevitable intervention in a world where China is not willing to face off against the U.S. China particularly is not willing to invade the Senkaku Islands if the Seventh Fleet is necessarily staged there, or if the U.S. is able to mount a response and able to keep the positioning. The next articulation I want is that they say that people are pushing Japan more nationalist. We would indicate that Abe is already extremely nationalist, which means that there's no differentiation happening in the uniqueness. On the link level, the next argument I want is that Japan constitutionally has no ability to retaliate, which indicates that their link story doesn't necessarily make sense, because Japan can't retaliate and have a standing military anyway. You say the Chinese intervention is inevitable. We indicate the Chinese intervention isn't inevitable in a world where the U.S. is able to maintain a strong position, but also that's probably, go to second advantage. The main argument I want is a no-solve, particularly that these troops just get moved to a different base under normal means. Normal means would not just discharge these troops; they would still need to require the certain amount of individuals who are deployed overseas, and these people aren't just kicked out of the military, which indicates that they just go to bases in places like the Republic of Korea or in various places in Africa or the Middle East, where they just commit this assault even more so. This is uniquely bad because it creates a masking where we think that we solved the sexual assault that happens from U.S. troops in bases in Japan, and then just ignore how it happens in other parts of the globe. We would indicate that also the counterplan is able to solve this in its entirety, so it's much better. We'd also say that on the impacts, particularly that extinction outweighs, because there's no healing or recovery from the types of assaults in a world where everybody's dead. It precludes any form of libertary future where a material sort of change can happen to resolve these sorts of violences, and natural disasters are necessarily an impact magnifier to structural violence, which indicates that we still have inroads to the biggest impact in the round in a world where your impacts get worse under
Text should be in chat.
Thanks. Starting time now. What's the status of the counterplans?
What we wanted to do.
We'll go unconditional.
Unconditional? Okay. Thank you. can you like summarize your second disadvantage, just like 1 or 2 sentences?
Yeah, so China's not aggressive because the United States is stationed in Japan. You get rid of the United States stationing in Japan, China gets aggressive, kills us all.
Okay, okay, so the order is gonna be T disadvantage 1. You know what? It's gonna be the same order as the LOC. Okay. Is anyone not ready? Cool. On the topicality, first is the we meet. We have promised to remove troops. This is what they're asking us to do. So we meet this interpretation. Counter interpretation, military guarantee means resources of the military that are committed to a nation or acting body. Onto the reasons to, or we meet this counter interpretation because this is exactly what we are doing in the plan. Onto the reasons to prefer. First is grammar. Words have different meanings in context than they do alone. We have to interpret words in the context of the resolution. That's the only stable locus that the app and the neg have to go off of. Little a is the res is the only stable locus. Second is this is more predictable. The military guarantee we have is the existence of troops in Japan. Our interp is better for education because we are using the military's actual like definition of what a military guarantee is. So our definition is uniquely better. We're going to say that this is not an a priori voting. This is not an a priori voting issue, and you should resort to reasonability. And also, don't vote on potential abuse. They read 3 off other than the T. They clearly they didn't lose anything by us reading like the app we did. So we win the theory shell. And this is not an a priori voting issue, even if you think that they won the sheet. That's not a reason to vote us down. Anything else, Tanya? Okay, going on to the first dised, whoops, you read your uniqueness in the wrong direction. At the point in time where they have not identified a single reason why natural disasters in the SQUO are being solved right now, then there's no link. We aren't going to this isn't going to get worse at the point where it's already bad in the status quo. Like these troops are not responding to natural disasters. They're talking about disaster relief programs from the US. Sure, these are in place, but these clearly aren't doing anything at the point in time where they've pointed out reasons why there are a bunch of fatalities in Japan and natural disasters are getting worse. The US troops are in Japan right now. The natural disasters and deaths are happening right now. So there's no reason that we make this uniquely worse. This is just this they don't solve for this with the counter plan either. So at the point in time, they're just advocating for the SQUO, and the SQUO is bad. There's no reason for you to vote neg here. And also, they have a counter plan. So vote app on presumption here. Anything else, Tanya, on decide 1? Oh yeah, and on all the impact, again, these are just completely non-unique because these are happening in the status quo already when Japan is there. So they can't say that these outweigh or anything because we don't link into them. Yeah. No? Okay. On to the second yeah, so the argument here is that this is non-unique. This is going to these natural disasters are going to happen no matter what. They've already identified themselves that this is happening in the SQUO, so there's no reason for you to vote for the neg here. And when the counterplan doesn't even solve for this anyway, they're talking about how the SQUO is bad, and they're advocating there's no reason that they solve for this, and there's no reason we link into this. It's completely non-unique. They don't get access to any of their impacts. On the second disadvantage, we're going to say that we're going to say that Japan is not going to we're not going to retaliate, especially not in the instances of troops pulling out. Right now, the troops are this advantage 1 actually turns this because it proves that China is aggressive in the status quo. China is not going to be aggressive once the US pulls out. China wants the US to pull out. They aren't going to be aggressive after the plan happens. Advantage 1 completely turns this. They say that war is inevitable. We're gonna say that that's a turn that the plan solves for this. They make arguments about Trump's rhetoric, making it making things bad with China, but that's happening right now also. That's also happening right now. If China, Trump has been attacking China for his whole presidency, and he also especially went hard for them during the coronavirus. If China hasn't backlashed now, then they aren't going to backlash when we pull away. And the only reason that they're going to backlash is because of Senkaku. Anything else?
Can you say Biden is set to win the 2020 election? So this doesn't
Oh yeah,
matter?
and Biden is set to win the 2020 election already. He's like pretty much already won the Electoral College. So, and he's probably going to have a better relationship with China. So China is not going to have any reason to lash out against the U.S. when Biden is going to win the election. Like it's pretty much
he's polling 2 digits ahead of. Trump,
he's polling 2 digits ahead of Trump, which has like a presidential elect or a nominee has never lost the election when he's polling 2 digits ahead of his opponent. So there's no reason that China is going to need to backlash. Second on the counter plan, Perm do both. Perm do the AF and the counter plan. This is not mutually exclusive at all. They don't even identify any mutual exclusivity. They say that it competes through net benefits because it solves advantage 2, but it avoids disadvantage 1. But at the point when disadvantage 1 and disadvantage 2 are not solved by the counter plan, or specifically disadvantage 1 is not solved for the counter plan, and disadvantage 2 is also like not going to happen anyway. There's no reason for you to prefer the counter plan. On top of this, they don't solve for advantage 1. They don't even try to make the claim that they solve for advantage 1. So that's a dissad to doing the counter plan alone. We should be able to do.
They don't just not solve it; they actively link into it. So it's a dissad.
Yeah, they don't just not solve the first advantage. They actively link into it. So that's a reason to not vote on the counter plan. So go for the perm. Also, the perm is a testing competition, not an advocacy.
Also, they said that. Yeah, they said they're unconditional. Hold them to that. If they try and
they're unconditional, and they're unconditional. So unconditional. They said that they were unconditional in cross-X. Hold them to that. The perm can solve all of advantage 1, advantage 2, and the disads. On advantage 1, this is really important. They say that the status quo solves because Chinese aggression is checked by U.S. troops, but they ignore all of our argument or all of Tana's articulation about how this is Senkaku is literally it's going to result in trillions of dollars of loss for China. Like at that point, like it's more of a loss for it in the status quo. It's more of a loss for them to just let Japan keep on ramping up using U.S. troops than it is for them to attack. Than for them to get aggressive. They are inevitably going to get aggressive because these they're going to inevitably get aggressive because this is literally their largest export. They concede this. China's largest export is within Senkaku. They're super like they
it's that export is the largest part of their economy, and Senkaku is how they export goods.
Yes, export is the largest part of their economy. Senkaku is how they export. If Japan keeps ramping up, their whole economy will crash, and there's no reason why they wouldn't backlash. Like at the point in time where in the status quo, they're going to lose their entire economy. There's no disside to them backlashing. They've already lost everything. Why wouldn't they backlash as well? So we're going to say that the backlash is inevitable. It says that Japan is nationalist in the status quo. That's the point. Japan is being Japan is getting worse and worse in the status quo. The plan stops it by reducing these nationalist power.
Yeah, the reason why them being nationalist is bad is because they have the military power to act out.
The reason them being nationalist is bad is because they have literally the biggest military in the world backing them up. If we pull out, we not only solve for Chinese aggression, we also solve for Japan being nationalist. Onto the links, they said that Japan has no ability to retaliate. They aren't going to have anything to retaliate against because China is not going to lose their biggest export. Their economy is not going to crash. They say that Chinese intervention won't happen in this quo. I think that they conceded too much on the uniqueness for that to be true. Their main economic export is Senkaku, and they don't solve for this with a counterplan.
On the uniqueness to disadvantage, never mind. The order is going to be advantage, disadvantage 1, disadvantage 2, the counter plan, aft, top, down. Disadvantage 1, disadvantage 2, counter plan, aft, top, down.
Are you going over the T?
Nah.
Okay.
Anybody not ready? Cool. The easiest ballot at the end of the round is going to be the natural disasters dissad. They have conceded the third uniqueness point, particularly the cooperation is happening now. There are two warrants here. The first argument is the Tomodachi, Operation Tomodachi, which translates to Operation Friend, in Japan, particularly in response to the 2011 Fukushima incident. The United States military mobilized its forces via the 7th Fleet in order to be able to literally cooperate with Japan in order to, search and rescue missions as well as, clean up the disaster. The next argument is that this created the Sendai Sendai framework, which creates standard operating procedures. We're going to indicate that standard operating procedures are necessary in order to be able to effectively create disaster relief, particularly because it creates a fast and effective method of being able to resolve natural disasters, particularly because those frameworks are already in place prior to the disaster ever happening. The link is pretty damning here, particularly that this undermines the bilateral cooperation in the area. This is not just about Japan, but this is also about the surrounding areas. In the world where the 7th Fleet does not have a staging area or the ability to help with natural disasters in the South China Sea area, this means that bilateral cooperation is necessary in order to be able to not only effectuate the standard operating procedures, but help in the natural disasters long term. This is particularly key in terms of the military. You have conceded the argument that the USS Ronald Reagan was the staging area, as well as it was the staging area for a lot of search and rescue missions, as well as the 160 sorties that were flew as search and rescue missions, as well as the bases used in Okinawa as refueling bases. That was actually the Ronald Reagan warrant, but the argument just still stands is that the military is used for search and rescue in terms of natural disasters. This is a massively conceded dissad. On the impact level, we'll indicate that natural disasters are necessarily worse for human rights. This means that natural disasters are going to be an impact magnifier for the second advantage, which you've also conceded, as well as any war scenario. You have not impacted out to extinction, which indicates that in a world where war is going to happen, either in a world where the affirmative or outside the counter plan indicates that natural disasters is going to make this much worse, because the vulnerable are already going to be vulnerable. Sea level rise and natural disasters destroy homes. It means that people have to move. They don't have the resource to be able to get back on their feet. In a world where the United States cannot effectively respond via things like Operation Tomodachi, there is no world in which these people whose resources are being destroyed can recover. This goes cold conceded. This is the easiest way for you to sign your ballot. On to the second dissad. We'll extend this argument that Japan won't retaliate. I'm not really going for this dissad, but we'll extend a bunch of reasons as to why the advantage isn't true. I want you to flag particularly that China wants the islands and that the United States is keeping them at bay, which means the status quo is able to resolve Chinese aggression. Moving on to the counterplan. At the top of the counterplan, they read a permutation do both. Will indicate that even if a permutation is able to textually compete, then textually be legitimate, will indicate that it is not functionally legitimate. Will indicate that not only does it resolve advantage 2, particularly by removing the very incentive systems for people to stay in the military. This not only solves back for sexual assault, but also doesn't get rid of people the majority of people on the islands, particularly because that's not everybody, as well as it doesn't get rid of the infrastructure that's there and people who are necessary in order to complete a natural disaster search and rescue missions. This indicates that we do not link to the second dissad. The next argument I want is that this still doesn't. This also solves the inverse advantage because status quo solves. They say advantage 1 is a dissad to the counterplan. I'll explain why that isn't. If the status quo is able to resolve the advantage 1, this means it's not a dissad. It means that we also have the second advantage as an external impact to the counterplan. Let's actually go to second advantage now. What I want on the second advantage is that the plan isn't able to resolve this because normal means that people who are court-martialed in military court just get moved to places like Africa or the Middle East. There is no, the plan just moves people. It doesn't mean that they're getting dishonorably discharged or the incentive structure is being removed. The only way you can resolve this, the only way you can actually disincentivize people is destroy the incentives, which is the benefits. The counterplan is able to resolve this because it freezes all benefits for those who are court-martialed, i.e. that if they, if they're court-martialed for sexual assault, they literally do not get the money or the benefits or the post-deployment benefits that come with the military. And you've already conceded that this is a majority of the United States defense budget, and when in terms of personnel costs, which indicates that this is a huge incentive for those people. Will also indicate that in a world where you aren't able to resolve sexual assault, this is just an impact this is a masking dissent, particularly because you say, oh, look, it's not happening in Japan, it's okay now, so you move them to the Middle East and as assault rates spike there, and that's the different impact, ergo it shouldn't be evaluated. Will also indicate that extinction, never mind. Yeah, let's go to that one. They'll probably go hard for this ad one and the uniqueness that there's trillions of dollars of investment for China in the Senkaku Islands. They say that this is the linchpin of the Chinese economy. I have a couple arguments. The first argument, it is literally not the linchpin of the Chinese economy in a world where they are spending trillions of dollars in Africa versus via the Belt and Road Initiative means that the international investments are not key via the Senkaku Islands. Will also indicate that the military power of China does not match up with the United States, which means that China is not going to be aggressive in the status quo. They know that the United States operates nuclear submarines across the world, which means that they will literally never attack Japan in a world where the United States has a nuclear umbrella under them. This is why they haven't done it. This is why even in 2017, when the United States this is especially why in 2015, Obama's Asia pivot, it made the Seventh Fleet the most powerful navy in the region. China never attacked. The next argument is you say that Japan will have retaliatory capacity. Will indicate that there is no capacity for Japan to retaliate in the status quo, particularly because not only are they beholden to the United States military goals, which is not attacking China, but will also indicate that even that Abe's nationalism has always been a thing, particularly that there's no bright line between how much more nationalist he needs to be in order to be able to attack China. Even if your training training makes Abe more nationalist, there's no bright line as to how this will trigger war with China, which means that their impact scenario is really, really unlikely. Furthermore, will indicate there's no China. There's no ability to retaliate because it's built into the Japanese constitution, particularly that they cannot have an offensive military force, which means that in a world where the United States is not only controlling the goals of the Japanese government, nor does the Japanese government have the ability to retaliate against China or even attack China, there is no world in which an intervention will occur via Japan. You are way behind on the warrant level. Furthermore, will indicate that a war is not necessarily going to lead to extinction. Do we want to say that?
I already said it does.
Okay, never mind. We won't say that.
You can say this war doesn't.
Okay, we'll say this war doesn't lead to extinction, particularly because even if
the time frame's further out, and then
the time frames,
and there won't be the nuclear posture review.
Okay, well, the time frame's further out. There won't be the nuclear posture review. The government won't be beholden to the 2018 nuclear posture review, which means that there will not be an extinction level impact. They haven't given you a time frame. Make them do that analysis at the PMR. But again, it's such a low priority impact that you default to structural violence and climate change.
Okay, the order is going to be brief overview, but then pretty much disad 1, counterplan, advantage 1. I guess I'll talk about advantage 2 on the counterplan, but it's not going to be a whole lot of stuff there. Yeah. And then yeah, that's that one. Okay. Anybody not ready? Sounds good. At the end of the round, you're going to be voting negative for Oregon GL because of too many concessions on the first disadvantage, particularly how the presence of U.S. troops is crucial for natural disasters. This is always going to bring you to the impact that you should be prioritizing within the round, which is going to be that of natural disasters and how they, one, are literally happening within the status quo and how they are just going to be getting worse. This indicates that the impact is increasing in magnitude as time passes, but also you should prefer this impact because because it's the most probable. We're going to say that you should prefer impacts based on probability, because basing impacts off of that are low probability but have high magnitude, or preferring magnitude, is always going to lead to stale forms of debate where people just try to race to the lowest probability but highest magnitude impact, which is always going to just lead to the same like discussions over the same like China scenarios, the same posturing, and the same hedge debates, which is necessarily bad for debate, because we've all had these blocks memorized since high school, and we all have these debates over and over again. But also, it's necessarily bad because it creates a sort of like it sort of like freezes you, because you think that there's always going to be some sort of like impact, and you can never take a particular action based on these low probability chances. Alex and I have read a ton of disads and one on extinction, but none of them have come true. So you should probably just start preferring probability. You can go to the disad proper. Particularly, they make the articulation that we read our uniqueness in the wrong way, but they just forgot about our third point, particularly about natural disaster cooperation, how it's happened in the past. Because natural disasters are getting worse, the only way that we're able to effectively deploy some sort of relief is going to be through U.S. military cooperation. Yes, the people still died in 2015 while the U.S. was there, but it would have been so much worse if Operation Tamagotchi didn't happen, which indicates that we're able to resolve this. Yeah. It's not. You can go to the counter plan. The big argument they might go for on the counterplan is going to be the permutation. They're right; it doesn't. It's not mutually exclusive, but it functions. It's functionally competitive, which means that it's still necessarily an opportunity cost to the affirmative, because doing the counterplan and not doing the affirmative avoids the natural disasters disad, which means that there's always going to be a reason on disad 1 for you to prefer just the counterplan and not the permutation.
The status quo solves advantage 1. Don't even risk it, Tom.
Yeah, if the status quo solves advantage 1, don't even risk a permutation, because that means that we've solved advantage 1, or that the counterplan, by nature of doing the counter, like solves advantage 1 and advantage 2. So you should just be voting on the counterplan because of a risk of the external offense of disad 1. You can also cross-apply that they're not able to resolve the sexual assault because the troops just get moved. No real articulations as to why that's not true. Probably means that you should be skeptical of if they go for that, but they're probably going to go for ad 1. So let's go there. Alex does a lot of really good backfilling for me in the MO, particularly about how the Chinese economy's linchpin is based in Africa, and particularly the Belt and Road, but also that there's U.S. Nuclear submarines literally all over the Pacific that are going to stop China from being aggressive. You can cross-apply in a world where there's Trump's nuclear posture review that says he wants to use low-yield tactical nuclear weapons for power projection. This indicates that China is not willing to be aggressive towards Japan in a world where there are troops, but after the plan there will be no troops, so that means that China will be aggressive, which means that we do have that the status quo necessarily solves this, and the plan only risks causing Chinese aggression, which is necessarily bad. Yeah.
No, keep going.
You can also extend their own articulation about no retaliation, and you can extend you can also extend that there's no bright line on the like sort of nationalism of Japanese politics. Like there's no link between this and whether or not China is aggressive in a world where Japan literally doesn't have like the military, because it's written into their constitution, because we beat them in a world war, means that there's not going to be you should be not voting on this, but also. Yeah. The impact is not very probable because it requires multiple internal link chains that are low probability.
Okay, 1 minute. Okay, I have a question about some of the MO's analysis on the second disadvantage. So you're saying that this outweighs because it's not just going to affect Japan. It's going to are you saying that it'll affect multiple parts of Japan, or it'll affect more countries than Japan?
Well, articulation, my MO analysis is that not only does this affect Japan, it also just affects our disaster relief ability in the South China Sea, or like in the East Asian region. Because
also, how does the SQUO prevent extinction, or like how does the plan lead to extinction?
Because China will never attack us in the SQUO, and Japan will never attack China in the SQUO.
Right. How does the plan lead to extinction?
Because you remove the troops.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
Like China can go.
Sounds good. Okay, is anybody not ready? Cool, okay. So the order, it's going to be advantage 2, advantage 1, the disad 1, the counter plan. Cool, and then an overview on that. Cool. All right, it's going to be an easy vote for the affirmative at the point where the perm resolves all the offense on advantage 2, which means that we do solve for sexual assault, and advantage 1 outweighs disadvantage 1, both on like probability and magnitude when it comes to extinction and when it comes to like smaller scale impacts. But let's start on advantage 2. So again, like when we institute the perm, like the masking stuff doesn't happen. It solves for this all of the offense on this sheet, so it's fine. Also, it's not the most since it's a tie there. Let's move on to advantage 2. Or sorry, move on to advantage 1. So there's a couple of arguments made in the MO about how like we're not going to lead to war in the status quo. I want you to extend what Brenna said about how this is like literally the linchpin of their economy. They make arguments about how like there's like other major economic like exports that they have, but it's in other arenas. But the fact is like they need Senkaku to get to those areas. That it's key to export in general, even if it's in other areas. Senkaku is key to them having export in general, which is if they're exporting for the Belt and Road Initiative, it has to be through Senkaku, which means that regardless of where they're eventually going to end up, Senkaku is key to this, which means that it's key to Japan's economy overall, which means that to China's economy overall, which means that as a result, if they were to interfere with, which they are in this quote, with China's overall economy, that means that there's no barrier to China attacking the United States. They make the argument that like China's not going to attack the US because we have nukes, but like China is located near Japan, which is a US ally, and South Korea, which is also a US ally, so they're not going to nuke China, which means that China doesn't have any reason to fear the United States. They can attack the United States regardless of if they have nukes or not, which will lead to great power wars and proxy wars. Even if it doesn't lead to nuke war, this leads to like millions of people dying. What was that, Brenna? Yeah. Yeah, so US military is still going to be present in places like South Korea, so this checks back. Which sheet is that on, Brenna? Yeah. So when the US isn't going to set off nuclear submarines because that would inevitably destroy their allies and lead to extinction. So the US isn't going to take that risk. China knows this and they aren't afraid. Yeah, so this means that China, yeah, so those were the two answers to this advantage. So this means that there is like no barrier to China attacking, which means that war is inevitable. At the very least, a proxy war in this area is going to happen, which will lead to the deaths of millions of people, which is a very significant impact and outweighs their impact of preventing of disaster relief for natural disasters. And we have a better link to extinction than they do, because move on to their DISAT on DISAT 2, where they talk about how like this will lead to conflict. They conceded that this isn't going, they float across this isn't going to lead to conflict. The only thing that can lead to war is potentially the economy. What was that, Brenna? Yeah, is the thing that's going to lead to war. So moving on to disadvantage 1, extend across what Brenna said about this, how this is literally happening in the scroll. They said that this is like a minor improvement on what it would be like if the U.S. military wasn't present. But I said, like, we would say that a minor improvement in search and rescue is definitely not as significant as preventing a proxy war in the region, which is going to happen because China has no reason not to attack the United States because they don't have fear of nuclear retaliation. Which means that in the SQUO, we are trending towards at least like traditional conflict in the area, which is going to lead to millions of people dying. And in the world of the counterplan, they're still like in the world of the counterplan, they don't solve for that. They don't avoid that. Like there's still that risk of those proxy wars happening. Yeah, Brenna? They said this is going to affect other countries too, but the U.S. military still exists and can check back for this, even if it's less effective. That's better than like major proxy wars happening. Additionally, they talked about how like Japanese nationalism doesn't matter because Japan doesn't have their own army. That doesn't matter. They have our army. We're saying that we pull our army away, and so then they can't attack China. Like basically, in the world of the SQUO, we're trending towards conflict because China and Japan are having military conflict. They're both amping up their amount of military training to record highs in this area, in Senkaku. So we are set to have conflict in the SQUO. In the SQUO, Japan is a threat to China being able to export, which is the most significant part of their economy. It is literally the linchpin of their economy. And this is the most likely way that they're going to go to war. They conceive that if we hurt China economically, they'll have no reason not to go to war. This is the most probable impact and is the most important impact in this round. And with the perm, they don't have any offense. So.
Good round, y'all.
Round, y'all.
Great job. That was really fun.